In 2014, 5 gyres released a report that was the culmination of several years and over a score of voyages dredging the ocean. They found that 5.25 trillion plastic particles are floating in the ocean. It's over 269,000 tons. That was just in 2014. That was 4 years ago. The rate of plastic manufacturing has not slowed down since then. It has, in fact, only increased. This is bad. This is not, as a lot of our readers thought, a giant floating Shangri-La of plastic bottles in the ocean. It's not a giant mountain. A lot of this stuff is teeny, teeny, tiny. It's a scum, a thin scum that floats on the surface of the ocean. This stuff is in the northern hemisphere, it's in the southern hemisphere, it's in the Arctic. It's found in coastal sediments. It is found in the circulatory systems of mussels. It is found in the fish that we eat. This is also bad. Not helping this situation is the fast fashion industry, which creates heaps and heaps of disposable petroleum-based fabrics all the time. Week after week, this stuff is shoveled into stores and then quickly shoveled right back out. Those that don't decompose in a landfill over several hundred years, those that are bought every time you wash one of these fabrics, 1 million microfibers is washed out into the ocean. This is bad. That is why we wanted to have a panel where we talk to small businesses. We wanted to put a spotlight on small local businesses that have sustainability woven into their DNA. These aren't large businesses that did something ad hoc, that do greenwashing, that say, hey, you know what's really hip right now? The ecology. Let's get something cool for the kids. No, Katherine and Mateo have started businesses that had green built into it, and they will only get greener over time. I would like to introduce to all of you Katherine Tyrell and Mateo Rennie. Now, Katherine Terrell is an environmental activist, a surfer, and a designer. Her brand, Jeux de Vogue, is a sustainable swimwear company. Kirby, a Pasadena-based electric car company, and the co-founder and CEO of 8 Hertz, which is taking plastic, recycled plastic, and turning them into beautiful products. They just recently released a bag made from 100% recycled plastic. So we're going to talk to them today about starting their businesses, about the challenges of having a sustainable business, and then we'll open it up to some Q&A from you guys. So just to start off, first of all, thank you very much for being here. What was the motivating factor for each of you? What got you started into the companies that you've done? Katherine, we'll start with you first.
Hi, so I'm a designer, and I've been a designer for many years since the beginning of my career, mostly at digital agencies. And one day, I was, not really paying attention at work because my mind was really not on the Nestle website that I was going to build. Because I really loathed Nestle by that point, because I was already very much involved with Surfrider as an activist. I saw this video of actress Koreancha Kilcher. She was Pocahontas in the New World, and she was in front of the White House, and she had tied herself up to the fence of the White House and had black paint poured over her, symbolizing the oil that was being extracted from her native Peru by these corporations. And she was 19 at the time, and I was almost, I was not 19, I was much older, and I was like, what am I doing with my life? Here's this actress, she's not even 20, and she is so dedicated to her purpose and her cause. And as a designer, I felt like I needed to shift what I was doing. So instead of building another website for Nestle, I needed to do something else. Well, fast forward a couple of years later, that's where I came up with the idea to do the bikinis, the sustainable bikinis.
Yeah, ditto on that. I'm background in design too, and kind of over time, I grew up at the beach surfing, kind of lived in the mountains, and always been into the environment, have background in solar energy. And my last company, prior to my last company, we got hired by a big shoe brand up north to do this huge project on climate change. And we went around the world partnering with all these scientists, and so I got a lot of insight into what's happening. And so when I exited my last company, I basically had to call myself out as a designer, because as designers, we can design pretty much anything unsustainable. To me, that's easy. But so I had to do that. I decided, you know what, I'm telling my kids to live this life. I need to myself be able to, look them in the face and go, we're doing it this way. And so started 8 Hertz with, the simplicity of making products from recycled plastic.
Great. So what have been the obstacles to sourcing sustainably? So obviously it's a lot easier if you can do things the way that the big guys do, that you just take your fabric from whoever's cheapest and just put it out there as quickly as possible. What are the challenges that you guys have found so far?
Well, thankfully in recent years, thankfully to material innovation, it's been much easier to source sustainably, meaning from recycled fabrics. I think over the last 3 years, there's been a couple of new products on the market that weren't feasible, 5 years ago. So for the fabric that I chose for my bikinis, that came to market very recently. So in that respect, I think it's been easier for a smaller brand to enter the market.
Yeah.
But in terms of, mass and scaling on a mass level, obviously we don't have this, it would be a challenge as any other small business would have.
Yeah, there's, for us, I look both domestic, international for fabrics. And, there's a few here in the United States, there's a lot overseas. And so for us, it was who's going to really support us and work with us. And we ended up working with a company called Waste Aware, which is a Dutch-owned company in Shanghai. And they've been great. So that was kind of our decision. And so they made it easy for us to just start prototyping the bags. They would send us the fabric and stuff. So.
Gotcha. And then what was the moment that you came to where you realized that, yes, this is possible? Like, I can do this. Like, I imagine that there were some moments when it became too tough, or you were worried that maybe it wasn't going to come through.
That hasn't come yet. So I tend to think optimistically, and when I do things, it's just kind of, you just go for it. So, you always have challenges as a startup. That's constantly, if you don't believe in what you're doing or passionate in what you're doing, you're going to hit that wall and give up. So having done this before, had successes and a lot of failures, gone through that, you just learn from those lessons, move on to the next one. And so, for me, I've had that experience where it's like, okay, hit this bump and move to the next one. So right now, we just launched, a month ago, so on IndieGoGo. And so on a small scale, it's like, I know this is a long-term play for us, and it's just one step at a time, and being able to pivot as a startup. So.
Yeah.
I think it was when I got my first international order that I was like, damn. and it was from Australia, too, so where, it's like the land of bikinis. So that was really amazing. That was really amazing to get our first international order. And really, getting our bikinis into a retail environment that sort of aligns with our ethos was great as well. I couldn't imagine, 6 months ago, my bikinis being like in Diane's beachwear, just because it would be like with other brands that are like a quarter the price, just because manufacturing is so cheap now, and especially if you make it, elsewhere with, cheaper materials. So when we finally got our bikinis into the Harmony Hotel in Costa Rica, which is this eco hotel, and it's also like a surfing haven, a surfing destination, that was a great winning moment for me. And it's doing great there. So we intend to hit other places like that.
In terms of being local, now you talked about being on IndieGoGo, which I imagine gives you more sort of freedom online. But being from California, do you think that this is a place that fosters businesses, especially ecologically friendly ones? What are the pros and cons of being based here?
I just have experience with companies in LA. So for us, it was an easy thing. We manufacture in Ventura with a small factory that manufactured for Patagonia. So that made things easier for us. We're going direct to consumer. We're not really looking at, retail right now. So, the challenge is LA is expensive. So Ventura is a little cheaper. But, that's definitely one of the challenges is, it's not cheap to do business in California or LA. So I don't know, it's just I think if I would have found a factory outside of the state, I wouldn't be moving to that state. But I think one of the benefits here is California, especially our involvement with companies like Five Gyres and working with ocean organizations. It's definitely a plus living here.
And does that come from just the philosophy of people, or just people are more interested in finding sustainable products?
Well, I think other countries are ahead of us, obviously Europe and, so we're getting interest from other countries right now.
Okay.
UK, Australia, Europe, Asia. So we're seeing it, on a global basis too.
And Katherine, in terms of Costa Rica, having that I'm sorry, what was it called? E-Hotel or?
The Harmony Hotel.
The Harmony Hotel,
yeah.
Sorry. Why was Costa Rica so much more open to these swimwear as opposed to somewhere else? Why there?
Well, Costa Rica for ecotourism is, it's famous for ecotourism, and especially this little town that we go to in Costa Rica called Nosara. And the Harmony Hotel has been there for many years, and the owners of the hotel are, they're stewards, they're environmental stewards themselves. So it was great to strike a friendship with them and align with them along that way. So it was just a no-brainer that we worked with them. And Costa Rica, you're there, it's hot, you want to surf, and you pop in the store and the bikini's right there. So that was, it's an easy sell. But in terms of working in California, I'm really happy that I manufacture here. I can really quality control my product. The speed at which that develops is much faster than, say, if I had to fly to Bali and, so work with, the Balinese labor there. I think that California also has a very strict sort of fair labor practices. So meaning, as a designer, I had to take this test that just ensured that I wasn't going to, that I was aware of labor laws in such a way that I wouldn't be working with a factory that would pay people $1 an hour.
Yeah.
So that really, that informed how I saw labor laws, on the ethical side of production, above and beyond environmental laws or environmental concerns.
Right. Now, we talked a little bit about this before, but Mateo, you've talked about how Five Gyres was a big influence on you, and of course, Katherine, you worked with the Surfrider Foundation. Have these organizations had a big impact in your personal ethos, or were you sort of drawn to them because you already were big ocean lovers?
So for us, me personally, it was connecting with the oceans. I wanted to help, stop the plastics getting in the oceans, and so I looked around for these type of organizations, and I came across Five Gyres right here in LA. So I connected, Haley's here somewhere with Haley, and they've been great. I consider them to be advisors. So when we talked about the bags and what the bags are made out of, I mentioned, well, I want to use this for the fabrics for apparel, and the whole microplastics conversation came up, and so I decided, okay, I'm not going to do that. So really, I look to them as, okay, what direction should we go in for certain material, for certain products? So it's been, in the short time that we just are creating this relationship, it's been highly valuable.
Nice. And then Katherine, with the Surfrider Foundation, I know you've been there for over 5 years.
Actually, I'm no longer an active member, but I do partner with them. We partnered with the LA chapter last summer in a series of surf community events called Surf and Brunch for women. And so Surfrider, basically my background was I volunteered with Surfrider for 8 years. It started with beach cleanups and then clean water initiatives in Malibu, and then it went on to Rise Above Plastics. And that model is sort of, it's expanded to many different programs that we see now, such as in Algalita, in the youth programs with Algalita. But so my involvement with Surfrider came to an end in 2011, sort of like as an active volunteer, but I definitely still give money, and I really appreciate that they've partnered with Jeux on our community events. But speaking of which, Five Gyres is one of our partners through 1% for the Planet. So we do give 1% of our total sales back to Five Gyres. And I chose Five Gyres simply because they were so effective in enacting the bead legislation, the microbead legislation, and that really inspired me. So Five Gyres and 350.org are our nonprofit partners through 1%. And we chose 350 for their impact on the fossil-free climate movement.
That's great. Let me check how much time we have. Oh, we have plenty of time left. So future projects that you guys are working on. What is the future? I know, Katherine, you're working on eventually getting to a completely closed-loop manufacturing system. What would go into that process, and how far in the future can you plan for something like that?
Well, right now, we say that we are sustainable bikinis, and that really is sort of a catch-all phrase that can get the average woman who might not know so much about what sustainability is all about. So we say we're eco-bikinis. But yeah, sure, if a really informed person came up to me and said, hey, but what about microfibers? Aren't your bikinis shedding microfibers into the environment? Or, what happens to your bikinis once they're, at the end of my bikini's life cycle, where does it go? Then I'll say, yeah, you're right, we're not truly sustainable, because if we were truly sustainable, then my dream is to offer a take-back program where once you're done with the bikinis, we shred them and break them apart between the nylon and elastic, and then regenerate it. But that really requires a technology that doesn't exist today. And I'm inquiring. I'm out there, at the fashion innovation seminars and workshops and conferences. So I'm trying to keep myself in the loop of what is technically possible.
Right.
But that is the dream.
So for us, since we manufacture the bags in Ventura, the goal is to manufacture the yarn here in LA. So on a bigger picture, we're looking at developing that. We're talking to the city. And we're also partnered with another company where we're taking bioplastic cups and material and recycling those and making hard good products. So on our table over there, we have prototypes of tiles and bricks that we're currently making. So that could be used for tabletops, for restrooms, hotels, and other type of products. So the goal is really to try to do that closed loop here in Southern California of actually making the material.
Now, I imagine that there is a percentage of both of your customers who they are looking for sustainable products. They're looking for things that are made from renewable materials, things like that. But obviously, to get real bigger success, you have to hit the people who aren't necessarily looking or searching for that. Now, some larger companies have gone out of their way to sort of give these token gestures of like, hey, we're doing this green thing. But it's not their main thing. That's usually like a sidearm. Does sustainability sometimes seem like a fad? Is it something that people are looking at and saying like, yeah, sure, we'll do this right now, and then people will forget about it? Do you have to fight against that, or do you really just sort of lean into that niche that you're filling?
I am noticing more and more that big brands, are feeling the heat from consumers, feeling the heat from from the movement that comes out of documentary films, such as The True Cost, if you're aware of that in fashion, which traces really like what is the true cost of your $2 dress that you buy at H&M. I think larger companies are certainly feeling the heat of that. For instance, H&M announced this year that they were going to aim for 100% recycled or sustainably sourced fabrics by 2013. Whether or not they're really going to do that is up to the growing movement of consumers who are demanding that from them. I don't think it's a fad. I absolutely think that it's moving in that direction. More smaller companies are entering the market, and bigger companies are joining that conversation. But it's really a matter of accountability. Are they really going to do it?
You got to hold their feet to the fire.
Yeah, I mean, we're not really looking at those companies. I just think the startups are the ones that are really going to innovate, because a lot of the big ones move very slow. They have these long-term goals, 2030, 2040, 2050, but it's the startups that can really innovate today and move things forward. So, whether they're doing it or not, yes, it'd be great to have the big brands because they have huge impact, like Starbucks and stuff. And yeah, I totally agree. Today, you see kids in these movements and other people that are making them make those change. So it's definitely, I don't see it as a fad at all. I mean, I think we're in a time right now where this is a perfect time to be doing these type of businesses.
Right. Well, I'd like to open up to some Q&A. Does anybody have any questions for our entrepreneurs here? Bueller?
Any other startups?
I think, I've actually noticed that Volcom launched a line of recycled fabric bikinis, right? Was it from Tencel? Yeah. Okay. I don't know how successful they were. I noticed that it's probably not on their e-commerce site anymore. So, are you aware of it being available anymore? Okay. Yeah, I haven't followed them that much just because I don't look at them as like a competitor or someone whose business, I mean, it's like their business is so radically different from my business that I go, oh, that's great that they're adopting that. But I don't see it worn around even. I really, in sort of my surfs and all my beach time, I really try to notice who's wearing what. And I think a lot of what women are wearing are, they're wearing billabong and stuff, but I don't necessarily think they're going especially for it just because it's a recycled fabric or it has an environmental thing behind it, So your question was whether or not you think they're making an impact, is that it?
No, I'm thinking about fast fashion direction. I'm with you and about California, and most of the girls I know here get bikinis from designers. And also in Costa Rica, I was just there, and usually all my friends got from local designers, but a lot of the times when I go and travel, you see that most of the girls get bikinis from those companies.
Yeah.
It's affordable.
Yes.
And they have a lot of followers. So I'm just trying to understand from like sustainability production, if those companies can really follow right now all their production from recycled materials.
I think it's great that they're using those materials. Whether or not they're making them in companies where people are getting paid fairly and are getting paid a living wage, and whether it's like safe working conditions, I don't know, but the fact that they chose to work with those fabrics, I think, is a move in the right direction. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, I don't want selfishly, I'm like, oh, it's so different that we're using recycled materials, but really, it actually would be great if everyone started using that, and that our point of differentiation is that our cuts are so nice, or our designs are so great, and it holds you so well that you just love our bikinis. That becomes the point of differentiation, And so I think it's great that the bigger companies, the Roxys and the Billabongs and the Volcoms, are using the recycled materials, and I hope people, pay more attention to that.
That's a great answer. Any other questions from the audience here? No? Well, then I will move on with my own questions. Mateo, Working from IndieGoGo, what have been sort of the positives and negatives of being like, I imagine that makes you more nimble than if you had a basis somewhere, like a physical basis or a physical storefront, something like that. Is that correct?
So what's the experience working with IndieGoGo? Is that what? My previous company, Irby, we did a campaign with IndieGoGo, so I had experience of doing that, and that was very successful. I mean, the goods and the pros and cons of the IndieGoGo is, you're not targeting someone specific, so it's global.
Is it more that they come to you, or you bring them in?
Yeah, I mean, you have to bring people to that, and then it's, their platform's all based on algorithms. So when you hit certain numbers, like 30%, 50%, 100%, and then having certain things that they do, but that still doesn't guarantee, that you're going to get the support too. So it's one platform on being able to launch a product. The good thing is you can do the pre-orders, so before you have to order. So that's kind of what you're using that platform for, is to be able to get some pre-orders, before making that commitment. So that it helps with that, but you need to have your manufacturing locked in, because most people make the mistake of trying to figure that out after they launch, and that's why you see a lot of deliveries that go past the deadline dates.
Katherine, as a surfer, you've talked about how part of the story of you creating Jeux de Vogue was being pregnant and thinking about like how do you surf with your new body, and then how do you surf afterwards. How does your experience as a surfer flow into your concerns for manufacturing? We talked about a little bit that with the billabong and your different cuts and things like that, but what does that experience give you as a designer for your product?
So our bikinis are, we market them to women who do surf, and but at the same time, if you want to like lounge by the pool, I want you to be like, hey, I want to look hot in a Jeux de Vogue as well. So it has to perform, and it has to be really fashionable. And I guess those are the two. Those were the real design goals when I sat down to design the bikinis. Is Patagonia, okay, here I go talking about Patagonia. But Patagonia bikinis, I mean, they perform great, but I felt that there was something lacking in them in terms of, fashion-wise. So when I conceived of the bikinis and in the design of the bikinis, I wanted to have the ethos of Patagonia and sort of the environmental commitment of Patagonia, but to have a sort of the fashion sense of something like a Stella McCartney. So, even Stella McCartney, a lot of her designs are very much for athletic performance as well. Bridging fashion, performance, and environmental ethos.
Would there ever be any interest in branching out into like male swimwear, or is that it's a very particular...
Like the mankini?
Yes, like the mankini.
Not yet.
And Mateo, so we can't talk about anything as risque as mankinis, but
Yeah, I don't know.
in terms of your plastic bag, what goes into that? What goes into the concerns of? I mean, what does that fabric feel like? What does it look like? And how do you get people to be interested in that as a product and something that they actually want to use and wear in their daily life?
Well, I think when people feel the fabric, they don't notice the difference. So that's what you want, and I think any of these products, they can't tell the difference, but, it has a nice feel to it. So people, you can't really tell the difference.
Yeah.
If you could, if it felt like plastic or it had this kind of maybe crinkly look or feel, then, but for us, that's not really a challenge. So it's just being able to tell the story. I think what we want is that we shouldn't have to ask for these products to be made from that. It should become the norm. But we do have to tell that story today because it still needs to get out there, and we need people to adopt that and stuff. So.
Is that an obstacle that you have to overcome? People thinking that it's gonna feel weird or it's not gonna be right. I mean, the same thing with bikinis. Like, do you have to tell people, or do you have to? How do you show people? No, it's a real product. It's not. It's not. You don't have to make any handicaps for it. It's good.
Yeah, I think that's a huge challenge for us. Is that I think there's this misconception that they hear like, oh, bikinis made from recycled water bottles or bikinis made from recycled fishing nets. They maybe start to feel itchy or something, that, it's like itchy and scratchy on their skin. But the reality is, all the feedback that we've gotten from our customers is that it's a high quality product. Mm-hmm. So really one of the challenges for us is to overcome the customer perceptions of what a, quote unquote, what a recycled bikini may feel like for them.
Mm-hmm. Do you foresee this becoming, we've already talked about how it's not a fad, you see people moving out. Like, do you ever worry that everyone's going to start their own little shop? And would that be good or would that be bad? Do you want more competition in the marketplace? Do you welcome it?
I think, and we talked about this earlier when we were talking, what's interesting about this market or this industry is it feels more collaborative than competitive. We talk to what would be regarded as a competitor to collaborate on stuff. So I think we need that in this industry, and that's the kind of people that we're meeting, that we're talking to. So we need it. It's not like, oh, I'm not going to help you. Someone came up to me today and said like, oh, can I come over to your factory and see how this stuff's made? And it's like, what are you doing? Well, I want to make bags too. I'm like, okay.
Now, in terms of collaboration, does that mean marketing or just manufacturing, or is it a bunch of things?
I think it'd be all of them. Mm-hmm. We try to be transparent. We talk about who we get the fabric from, where we manufacture. I believe transparency is, because it's like, oh, I don't want to share where I'm getting the fabric from, but it's like
your secret ingredient.
But it's like, we're not making that fabric, so I'm not going to be, lying about that until we're actually making it. So it's like, I want to help that company, and I want to help the industry too. So
I totally agree with Mateo. Is that the transparency? When people ask me where my fabric's from, I'm like, okay, it's from our this is our source, this is where we get it, and this is where we manufacture. You want to go come for a tour? We're super transparent about all of that. And in addition, Jeux de Vague can't make all the bikinis for all the demand for bikinis out there. Right. So we definitely see it as a collaborative thing. I can't make the 5 million bikinis for the 5 million women who want them, So we're here, we're offering this for the slice of the market that wants what we offer. And if you want to come into the market and offer it for what, your segment of the market wants, all the better.
That's great. Oh, question? Yes. So it's like, what's the conversation between like non-sustainable? That's a good question. Have you interacted with people in your space who are starting out but aren't necessarily using renewable or sustainable sources?
Yeah, I went to a trade show in Huntington Beach called Swim Collective, and we were exhibiting with many other brands. Locally as well as national and international. And I found it as an opportunity to even educate people about the plastic pollution problem. We were the only ones there who, I'm pretty sure we were the only ones there who had an eco line and message. And so honestly, I just talked to my neighbors about, oh, did you know this? Did you know that? And everyone was like, wow, really? I did not know. And we all kind of went about our own business. I'm sure they went back and continued to operate the way that they do, but they seemed genuinely happy that I told them about all of this and were very receptive to the conversation. So it was just an opportunity for me to spread the message.
Yeah, we're actually talking to a large yoga company that makes their own bags and clothing, and they want us to actually manufacture a bag for them. So they have the same ethos, which is good, but I talked to other entrepreneurs that have other bag you know, traditional. And so it's really educating them and showing them they can do this too. So.
Well, that's great. Well, Mateo, Katherine, thank you very much for your time. Ladies and gentlemen, these are